On today's episode of Made in America, I'm with Tim Backus of Har-Conn Chrome. We cover some really interesting topics, including third-generation businesses, the importance of leadership training, and open book management style. Don't go anywhere. All right, I'm here with Tim Backus from Har-Conn Chrome, our neighbor right around the way in West Hartford. Really excited to have him on Made in America podcast. Tim, thanks so much for coming on.
Happy to be here.
So it's the Made in America podcast. We'd like to start off with the classic questions. What do you make and why do you make it?
Actually, we don't make anything. We make aerospace components better,
right,
by providing many different types of plating,
sure,
many other types of coatings and metal finishing that either protect in some way,
right,
provide corrosion protection, wear resistance, lubricity, you name it.
right.
Any type of engineered coating that fits that bill, we do.
So is it all aerospace components that we're plating or we're covering at Har-Conn?
95%. We do some industrial work, and we also do some weapons, some guns, but a very small portion of what we do is that.
So 95% is going on something that's going to be flying through the air, whether
Yes.
it's commercial or military,
Yes.
something in the air. So what's the why behind sort of Har-Conn? Maybe give us a little bit of the origin story, how the business got started, how you guys got into plating to begin with. You know, it's not I don't know who wakes up in the beginning of their career and goes, let's go plate some stuff, or even knows that happens. So
it's actually a pretty interesting story. My grandfather started the business in 1948.
okay,
He was working in the aerospace industry prior to buying the business, and started just as a general plater. I mean, they were plating Indian motorcycle parts, machetes, whatever they could, whatever they could plate.
If it was metal and needed a coating, they were on it.
Yeah,
Cool.
It was my grandfather, two business partners.
Okay.
And
Here in West Hartford or Hartford?
yeah, right where we are, right?
Oh, wow.
Right on New Park Avenue.
Okay,
That's
no
exactly where we started.
Okay.
And my grandfather was actually taking some night classes, ran into some aerospace engineers, and they asked him if he was interested in, doing plating for aerospace business.
Okay.
And so he said yes. And that's
it. Here we are
so
today.
that was like in the 1950s probably when we started to do that. And we've been in the aerospace business ever since.
Wow, that's fantastic. Yeah. And so your dad took over. So how long was your grandfather in the business?
My grandfather passed away in 1989, and he was the chairman of the board. Still
okay, so he was in it. He was in it the whole time.
Yeah. So yes, it's been like I said, third generation. So my grandfather started the business. My father, who's now our chairman.
Okay.
And our historical reference.
So we maybe know what your future looks like, right?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Could be that.
Yeah.
And, we have third generation working in the business as well as starting on fourth generation. So we're pretty proud of that.
That's very cool. So I know Har-Conn's got another location outside of Connecticut. So maybe you could talk a little bit about kind of how that came to pass and kind of how that operates with the current business.
Sure. So in the early 80s, when my father became president of the company, he decided it was a good idea, because the aerospace industry was doing really well,
right,
to expand into Texas, Fort Worth, Texas, and Columbus, Georgia.
Okay.
So we built two plants. Well, we purchased one plant and built another.
Wow.
And within a couple of years of each other. And in the early 90s, when the aerospace industry retracted some, we closed our Columbus, Georgia plant and just focused on the two. So we have the West Hartford facility and the Fort Worth facility.
Okay.
Our Fort Worth facility is very similar to what we do. Smaller range of coatings. They tend to focus on light metals because that's kind of what the focus is in that area. Airframe components, usually aluminum and titanium parts is what they focus on. So,
and as opposed to, how does that differ from what you guys focus on in West Hartford?
So West Hartford, because we're right in the backyard of Pratt & Whitney, GE's not too far away. Most of what we do is engine components.
Okay.
Heavier type components, landing gear, things like that.
So just a relative size, how many employees do you guys have in West Hartford? How many are in Texas?
So we're up to 110 employees in West Hartford and about 25 at our Fort Worth location.
So West Hartford's significantly larger,
Yes.
kind of the mothership.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit, I know we've talked in the past a little bit about kind of the aerospace roller coaster, as it were. So, and I think you guys have a really interesting story to tell, and there's a lot of folks in Connecticut who will listen to this podcast who probably lived that experience, or maybe some newer companies or newer company managers who haven't been through it. And our goal here is to kind of share some information and have everybody kind of have the whole kind of economy rise together. So talk a little about your experience in the aerospace roller coaster, as it were.
Well, so I've been involved with the business for 34 years.
Okay.
I basically started in the business when I was 16 years old.
Okay.
And it's all I've ever done. And over those 34 years, seen a lot of ups and downs in aerospace. There's never been a time in aerospace as good as what we're seeing right now.
Wow.
And it has been a roller coaster. The idea that the business was coming has been on the horizon for several years prior to it actually coming.
Isn't that always the way?
Yeah. So we always heard that it was coming, and the funny part about it was it came in, one full swoop. It
Really?
showed up on our doorstep in the blink of an eye, and then it was here. So we've had really 3 years of very substantial growth. The aerospace industry is doing amazing right now. And I say this, that if you're not doing well when you're in the aerospace industry, you're doing something wrong.
Right. Maybe pick a different line of work.
Yeah, because there's so much work out there right now.
Right.
I mean, we're actually able to pick and choose the work that we want, more so than having to take everything that shows up at our door.
Right.
We probably get somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple hundred quotes a week.
Oh, wow.
And we can't keep up with it.
Wow.
So
it's a good problem to have, right?
it is a good problem to have. And so the roller coaster, we're basically on the up as far as.
Do you think it's got more legs? Do you see more legs on it? I mean, listen. Obviously, if you could predict the future, we could do a lot of great things. But you've been in this, like you said, 34 years, and it's been in the family genes for well longer than that. I mean, what do you see as the trajectory that we're on right now? Are we at the peak? Are we still moving? Are we stable for a while?
Well, if you listen and take into account what the industry is saying, we're going to continue to rise for a little while and then level out.
Okay.
But it's going to be, the projections are that things are going to be good for quite a while. I mean, they're projecting about 30,000 new aircraft to be built between now and 2030.
Okay. So that's a lot of aircraft in 11 years.
There's always things that can affect that.
Sure.
Economic downturn, people aren't going to fly. Those orders are going to be, pushed out.
Right.
So, we'll have to see how that goes. It's been a nice run so far. And typically they go, from what I've seen in research, they typically go 5, 6, 7 years. So this one looks like it's going to be longer than what we've seen, as long as something unusual doesn't happen. Right. Which is
what I mean. Do you know what's driving that? Like, what's kind of the underneath driver? I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can comment on it. But I think there's a sort of a theory around here that the military buildup is what's driving the aerospace business. But I don't think that. I mean, that might be a small part of it. But I actually think it's really the commercial thing that's driving, or at least that's what I've seen. I wonder your thoughts on that. What you see as kind of the driving force?
It's definitely the commercial side.
Yeah.
There's a piece of it that is tied into military. But the commercial side, and what you'll probably hear from a lot of people that you ask that question to in this area, is what's driving it is the new engines,
the GTF,
and not just the GTF. That's definitely a key player, but GE engines, Rolls-Royce engines, the fuel efficiency that they've been able to develop with all those engines, the new airframes that the Boeings and
sure.
Airbuses are developing. The largest cost for an aircraft is the fuel cost.
Right.
And I'm not exact on this, but I think that Pratt & Whitney engines are saving somewhere 15 to
20%,
15 to 18% or something like that on fuel costs, which is like, could be like $1 million a year in just fuel costs per aircraft. So that's really what's driving it, is the efficiency of the new aircraft, the new engines. It really comes down to dollars and cents, aging fleets.
Sure.
And then a big part of it is, you have areas like Asia and, the Middle East that are growing rapidly. Used to be third world, type countries and didn't have,
people that could afford airline tickets
or airlines,
right, or even airlines,
and they have airlines now. So India, all those places are becoming massive.
And by the way, you've just ticked off big percentages of the world population in saying Asia and India, which is probably over half, the world population right there. So those people start flying the way we fly around here. They're going to need a lot of airplanes, which seems to me that even if we hit a bump, right, and there's a lot of talk now about a recession coming next year or a slowdown. I mean, even if it slows down for a period, they're not going to not fly eventually, right? So you'd figure the need for that would come back. And sounds like the efficiencies in the airlines, the engines actually make investing in a new fleet actually more affordable and more better operations over time, which seems like that's going to drive more need for the aerospace industry.
Definitely drives it. Yeah,
so when you guys built those two plants in the 80s, how many people were working at Har-Conn in West Hartford? And I'd love to kind of see the kind of juxtaposition, when things were good, what did the employment base look like? Where did it go in the 90s when it wasn't so great? And how did that come back?
Yeah. So in the 80s, prior to this uptick in business, we always look back to that and say that was the best time.
Okay.
Military spending was probably extremely high back then.
Sure, Cold War.
And our revenues and profits were very high. We had about 110 employees in the 80s.
Okay.
And we were doing I think the most revenue we did at any given year in the 80s was about 8 million.
Okay.
We're going to be doing close to 14 million with the same amount of people today. So it's kind of interesting to see that comparison.
Business has almost doubled, but the peak employment's kind of still the same.
Yeah. So we're more efficient.
Yeah. Is it automation, efficiency, or
it's newer equipment? It's efficiency. It's it's driven by a whole new type of business model as far as it goes. Like the technology, as far as what drives from a science standpoint, what we do hasn't really changed.
Sure.
But
coating metal, right? Yeah. Like the atoms haven't changed. Yeah. The molecular structure hasn't changed, right?
The chrome solution is still a
chrome solution. Yep.
But we have newer equipment that is more efficient and more environmentally, safe than it was before. And just the way we do things is much more efficient. But in comparison to the 80s, so that was the previous really good time.
Right.
The 90s and into the early 2000s, it was a struggle. So in the 90s, we went from 110 people in the 80s down to about 60 people. Our revenues were cut in half. And it was a struggle.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think what's interesting is people talk about how, manufacturing has decreased in the United States, but when you actually look at output, it hasn't decreased. So it's fascinating now that like kind of Har-Conn's living that life, right? You've got the same number of employees you had at the peak in the 80s, but you're doing about 50% more revenue. And you're saying that that's really all equating to, some technology improvements and efficiencies because the coating's the same. So have you seen a commensurate increase in salary? Meaning, are there more skilled people now? So you might have less people, but they're getting paid more. I mean, look, obviously you're paying people more in 2019 than in 1985. Mm-hmm. But on a relative basis, are there higher skilled people that you're doing who are operating different machinery, or is that not really part of the deal at Har-Conn?
No, the interesting thing about us is, and one of the things you hear, especially in Connecticut, is that our customers have a very hard time right now with the industry growing like it is, finding skilled people to run their CNC machines or program them or what have you. For us, we hire people for attitude and aptitude.
Okay.
So we have several resources that we utilize for finding those people.
Like recruiters talking about?
No, just, we use, just locally here, we use the Hartford Job Corps.
Okay.
They do a fantastic job with maybe taking some at-risk youth or young adults and teaching them, either inspection or some other type of skill that they can use out in the workplace. They teach them life skills, they teach them respect, they teach them all that stuff. So that's just one that we use, but we hire the people for attitude and aptitude. If they are willing to learn and they put in the work, they show up for work every day, we train them.
Right.
We actually have a new program now that we bring people in. They run through this program. It's I don't even forget what we call it, but they come in and they work for like 90 days and they work in every different aptitude in our facility so that they can learn, not so they get every last detail, but it helps them understand how we do things and they can make good decisions on a day-to-day basis. So,
I'm going to dig on that a little bit. So recruiting and retention is big right now with all businesses, right? But in manufacturing, because there's so much demand in aerospace manufacturing in particular. So you say, kind of hire for aptitude, train the skill type of thing. So what are some of the techniques that you guys are using to find the right aptitude? What are some of the questions that you're asking? How do you kind of filter that down to make it actionable for people?
That's a good question. Because you make a lot of mistakes when you do that.
You sure do. You sure do.
Generally, it's a pretty solid interview process, trying to get to those key points that we want to see people have. Can they answer your questions when you ask them a direct question?
Sure.
Do they know what their strengths and weaknesses are? Will they show up for work every day? Do they have a car? Can they get to work?
Can they get to work?
So some of those basic things to start with, but the onboarding process, and that's where I was going before, that we've just designed is really a key element in that, because after 90 days, we'll have a good understanding of where those people stand, and we can make decisions on maybe where their skill set is and where they can go. Or maybe we're just not a good fit for them.
Well, that's interesting. So you're almost using that kind of initial 90-day trial period, if you will. So maybe not as much pressure entirely on the interview process and more on the like, hey, if they pass sort of these basic benchmarks, we like them, they're presentable, they communicate decently, they show up to the interview on time. You kind of get through those basic interview hurdles, then you get a shot. And it's almost like a test drive. They get to come in, and that's really interesting, right? Because then you get to kind of run them through the facility and find out, we might have thought that they'd be good, in inspection, but it turns out they're, going to be better in shipping or whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
That's great. So has that been something you guys have done pretty just recently? Has it been
very recent?
Okay.
Yeah, very recent. My wife is our HR director, and she put the whole program together, and we have the first 2 employees that we are involved with that program, running through it right now.
Oh, that's exciting. So do you guys have a number of openings that you're trying to kind of fill up right now?
We're always hiring.
Are you?
We've been hiring nonstop for really 3 years straight.
No kidding.
Yeah. There's always a spot to fill, and sometimes it's a replacement. Somebody leaves or whatever, but we have very little turnover in general. We try very hard, because I believe that the difference between us and anyone else that does what we do, the plating part, the process part, everybody can figure that out.
Sure.
But it comes down to your people.
Yep.
That's the difference. That's what makes the difference between us and everybody else that does what we do. And I think we have fantastic people, and that's why we do so well.
So talk to me a little bit about how you kind of developed the culture at Har-Conn. Is it a culture that you've thought through, something that's kind of carried through that you inherited? Talk a little bit about what it's like to work there. What's maybe get on that a little bit.
We drive our culture very hard.
Okay.
So it's not by accident that we are what we are, and culture killers do not stay in our organization for long.
Yep.
They'll spin out most of the time on their own because they don't fit our culture.
Sure.
And it's done in a cordial and respectful way. But you have to be, in today's business world, you have to be the driver of your culture. You can't let something else do that. So we stay on top of that very, very, very strongly, and push it on a daily basis.
Is that something that you're personally involved in, Tim? Like, are you working that culture thing yourself? Something you've delegated that your wife or HR director is working more on? Both of you, leadership team all together? Talk about that.
It's our whole leadership team.
Sure.
And one of the things that has made a big difference in our business currently, and will help us in the long term, especially as those of us that we consider to be older work our way out of the business. We've also put an emphasis on leadership training for our up and coming leaders. Yep. So if we see an individual that is showing us that they have leadership qualities, but they don't have all the leadership details, we actually run them through a leadership program. So we've put probably a dozen people through that.
Is that something you guys run internally, or you partner outside, or how do
we have a partner that we use outside? A facilitator.
Would you share that? Is that something you would share?
Yeah, the gentleman's name is Jim Grigsby. He actually started a group called Tab.
Oh, sure.
This guy is pretty awesome. He worked for Ross Perot at one point, and he's a fantastic facilitator. He put together an emerging leaders program for us and the other companies that are involved with that. And on an annual basis, individuals run through that. They learn all the leadership qualities.
That's fantastic.
And then we plug those in and we tie that in with our culture.
Okay.
So that in itself helps drive our culture, because it's not just me at the top doing it. We also have nodes of people that understand
culture champions kind of in different pockets, making sure everybody's living
they can not only lead on the tactical stuff on a day-to-day basis on how we run our business, but they can also lead individuals in their different profit centers, for lack of a better word, to continue that culture. So,
mission, vision, core values, that type of stuff has been something that's been, in the business zeitgeist for a while, but I would say certainly in the last 20 years and even more so in the last 10 or so, that's been a big thing. Are you guys on the core values kind of written bandwagon and sharing that with the team and getting out there? You guys do that?
Absolutely. So one of the ways we do that is, many years ago, I read a book called The Great Game of Business. If you've never read it, I suggest you read it.
It's a good book.
So it talks about open book management.
It does indeed.
And that book uses like very open book management.
Very open.
So we use a variety of that. And what we do is we do a quarterly communication group meeting.
Okay. Like company-wide type?
Company-wide group meeting. And we open up our books to our employees so they understand where the company is, where it's going, how it's doing, how it impacts them, how certain initiatives impact them directly or indirectly. Yeah. And so we give all that information on a quarterly basis, because my philosophy on that has always been that you can't expect individuals that work for you, even at the lowest levels. When I say lowest, I'm talking about your entry level or production workers, to make good decisions on a day-to-day basis if they're not aligned with the direction that the company's going in. And you can do that with having your leadership do that, but you really want to drill it down as far as you can to have success. And I honestly believe that part of the reason that we've had this success that we've had is the team that we've put together, but the way we've done it with driving leadership throughout our business culture and everything like that.
Are you training them on are you when you say open your books, are you giving like P&L copies out and are people trained on cost of goods between SG&A so they know what they're reading? Is it target based? If I wanted to do this, kind of share with me your experience and what's worked. And
so we don't drill down that far. Okay. We do show them cost of goods. We do show them revenue. We do show them the parts of the balance sheet and everything like that. And then balance sheet. And then every meeting is like a mini training. Okay. On how it is. So here's where we are and here's what it means. Right? Okay. So we don't go down to the nth degree because we don't want to complicate it for people. Yeah, but we want them to understand what their actions on a daily basis and the impact that they have. Sure. We talk about things like how important it is to pay attention to the little things, because we're dealing with aerospace components. We're not doing bicycle parts, and even bicycle parts would be important too, because someone, they don't want the wheel to fall off. Sure. But here we're talking with aircraft that might be holding hundreds of people. Absolutely. And every little thing that we do is important. So, that gets driven through those meetings as well.
And how long have you been kind of working this great game of business concept?
I think I read the book in the 90s.
Oh, wow. So unlike the 90-day trial program, this has been something that's been kind of deeply baked into Har-Conn, and something you feel like has been a contributor to be able for you guys to ride this successful wave going forward.
Without a doubt. Absolutely.
So talk a little bit about the transition. So I think it's really fascinating at least in Connecticut and in kind of my travels, of the businesses that I've seen most multi-generational, it's a lot of these manufacturing businesses. And we talked to someone earlier in a previous episode about, kind of the old axiom, right? The first generation starts it, the second generation grows it, the third generation kills it or ruins it or whatever. Right. But we're fortunate now to have you on, right? And I would say that's not true at all, right? You've been a genesis of really bringing Har-Conn through some really hard times, and now back to even the best times in it's over 60, 70-year history. So just talk about the transition. And I don't know how much you know about the transition from your grandfather to your father. Certainly you know about it from your father to you, but just talk about it and how other multi-generational businesses who might be thinking about that, how they could do what you guys did and be successful in doing it.
Well, I think if I were to evaluate that, I think the difference between us and companies that don't have success with that is that there's not a single one of us family members that came into the business and just assumed a position. Mm-hmm. So every one of us had to start from the very bottom of the business in some way, shape, or form. Not everybody went the same path.
Sure. But we're not all the same people with the same skills. Yeah.
Right. But we all started at the very bottom and had to work our way up. And, you know, started with my grandfather in that way, with all of his sons and all of my cousins and everyone else who has either worked in the business and stayed or worked in the business and left, that you had to start and work your way up and show that you aren't just there collecting a paycheck. You're not just collecting a paycheck. Mm-hmm. In fact, as a family member, you have to work harder than everybody else. Mm-hmm. And the people that have grasped that concept, family members, are the ones that are still in the business today.
Well, maybe I should ask that question to start off with. How many people from the family work in the business? So I had known that I know you and your wife work there, but I didn't know. Maybe you want to.
So it's myself. My wife is our HR director. Our executive vice president is my cousin Daniel. Okay. We have vice president of operations is my cousin Casey. Okay. Wow. His brother Wes is our quality manager. Okay. I have a brother-in-law that's a salesman. I have a brother-in-law that does deliveries for us. Okay. Daniel's son is working in the business as he's an assistant production manager. And my son is working in the business in production. He's not probably going to stay in the business, but he's working for us now.
Wow. So this isn't just sort of you and your dad and your grandpa. This has been deeply, must be some interesting Thanksgiving dinners we'll have to talk about at some point. So, talk about that, working with your wife in the business, working closely. How's that worked out? How do you guys kind of divide out, because you got a lot of stuff going on, kids at home. I mean, most of us that are married kind of know the challenges that can be there regardless of working together. And then you throw in that. So how have you kind of been able to do that kind of work-life balance in a, different way? It
can be challenging at times, but we actually enjoy working together. I mean, that's the part that I think, if you talk with anybody else, I could never work with my wife, but we actually enjoy working together. And just as at home, we complement each other in many ways. Mm-hmm. So it works out very well. It's never going to work and go, oh, I'm working with my wife.
Right.
I actually look forward to it. So
that's awesome. And what's kind of cool about that too is it's easier for her to know what's going on in that part of her life, of your life, and vice versa, right? Because sometimes it's hard. My wife works in a totally different industry, than me, and so we do talk, but it's sometimes it's hard to super follow. So I could see where that could be awesome.
Well, you asked about what has helped get us to where we are. And I honestly, because I used to be the one that did the human resources stuff amongst everything else. Okay. And thank God that my wife is there, because I believe that the people that she's been able to hire in the time that she's been in charge of HR, and the policies, the programs, and everything that she's done. She's on the board at Hartford Job Corps. She goes to every workforce event that's in the area, just looking
for talent,
and getting us out there. We never did any of those things.
At the time.
Yeah. And it's been a huge driver for us in the success that we're currently having. If we didn't have that, I don't know where we'd be.
That's really going back to the people part that you talked about earlier. The people make the difference. So that means you got to invest in recruiting to recruit the people to grow the business. So on that topic, what do you think, given the boom that we're in, what do you think is the biggest hurdle for you to grow another 50%, right? Is it location? Is it space? Is it people? Is it taxes? Is it you just don't have the energy? Like what would you see as kind of the biggest hurdle for you to take the next leap?
Yeah, for us right now, it's definitely space. We've been in the same facility since 1948, obviously with some expansions here and there. We've purchased next door, buildings next door, and utilize those to the best that we can. So we're about 70,000 square feet right now, and with the growth that we've seen, it's been tough. Very difficult to find ways to continue to grow the business. Although we do have shift capacity that we can still utilize.
How many shifts are you guys running right now?
We run really, in a way, 3 overlapping shifts. We have folks that come in at 4 a.m. and work till about 1.
Mm-hmm.
We have
I see. Yep.
a 7 to 3:30 shift, and then we have a shift that goes from 1 to 9:30.
Okay.
So it's overlap. So we still have room for that. It's, sometimes that's the hardest part.
Like
of
9 p.m. to 4 a.m.
finding people
window.
to work. Yeah, work
sure.
that.
Yeah.
So,
then people to work it, supervise it,
right.
handoffs. It's complicated in its own way.
But we do need square footage. So we've looked both at purchasing buildings and building on our site. So we're still working those angles to find out which is going to be the best solution for us.
Is that is the physical plant capacity a bigger challenge than workforce now, only because you have the workforce pretty much to fill the building you have, and then if you expand the building, then it's like, okay, now I got to find the people to fill it. But really, that's their
I would say that's probably our biggest challenge. I mean, we don't really have the issue with the workforce because of the way we hire and train.
Oh, that's awesome. Good kudos for you.
Yeah.
So why do you think Connecticut has grown so much? Listen, I'm a big Connecticut booster. It's the reason I'm doing this podcast, is to get some of these great stories like that's happening at Har-Conn, and all the other people we're having on here are going out there, because I think there's just too much talk about the stuff that isn't going right, which, listen, you run a business. You know that you could spend all day going around Har-Conn. Even in your best year ever, you could spend your whole time talking about the things that aren't working right. You could point at this, you could point at that, you could fix this, you could fix that. Every business, I could do it all day long, but that's not what's going to make you successful, right? What's going to make you successful is pointing out and encouraging more of the things that are working. And so the podcast has been, my effort to kind of help build that community, especially on the manufacturing front. And I think it's interesting that, you're in Texas with one of your facilities, and you're in Connecticut with another facility, and the Connecticut facility's been growing leaps and bounds, and tons of great stuff there. And I just wonder, maybe you could share kind of why is the Connecticut growing, and kind of what's your view on the ability for businesses in Connecticut to thrive?
So I'm going to focus on the aerospace industry because that's what I know the most.
Yep.
And what I can tell you about Connecticut is I don't think there's another region in the world that has the aerospace expertise that we have.
In the world. I just want to repeat that in the podcast.
In the world. And I say that from the standpoint, and being a little bit jaded from the standpoint of being highly involved with our local cluster group, the Aerospace Components Manufacturers. And I'd be remiss by not mentioning them because they're an amazing organization that has grown to probably, I don't know, 140,
I think.
Is it? I don't remember what the number is now.
I think it's 140.
But and every one of those companies collaborate, work together to continue to grow the aerospace market here in Connecticut, and the expertise that each one of these companies has and how they fit in with their little niche of the aerospace industry. I don't think you find that in such a concentrated location anywhere in the world. There's not another group like ACM anywhere. There's other similar ones.
Sure.
But with the impact and the effect that the ACM has here, it's huge. So what Connecticut has to offer the aerospace industry is really second to none, in my opinion, from anywhere else. The other stuff that we talk about that are negatives about Connecticut, you're right. Don't focus on those. Focus on what's good about Connecticut. What the manufacturing base in general can do for the world.
Yep.
I've been to other states, and I'm not, knocking them in any way, because there's a lure for people in this region to like move there, take their businesses there, and everything like that, and they get good things from the standpoint of tax relief and lower cost of living, but they don't have the technological and technology support and the expertise that individuals have here in this region. So,
and that's really ultimately right. It's going to drive what's going to drive business, what's going to drive success, especially in the aerospace business, is really that expertise, the precision, and having that cluster is fantastic, right? To be able, and we talked about it earlier, about, if you're, especially if you've got OEMs nearby, right? Looking at the Pratt engines and the GEs, if you're going to ship a part somewhere to get it one process there and then ship to another state for a second process, ship back here for a third process and back, that's adding cost and complexity and delays. where having a nice cluster that's all nearby and together, we can visit each other, talk together, problem solve. Right. It's unique, and I think it's really awesome. So it's been awesome having people on here who can speak to that, and you're walking it every single day. So appreciate you sharing that. One of the things, other things I like to talk about with manufacturers is, and it's true for all businesses, but manufacturing is in all businesses, you have a limited pool of resources. You got to decide where you want to invest. And you've got equipment, you've got training, you've got recruiting, you've got information technology, IoT, Industry 4.0, physical plant, parking lots can be complicated even. When you're looking, Tim, and you sit down with your leadership team and try and figure out how you're going to invest where, how do you guys do that? What's the thought process you go through? How do you decide when to invest in what?
So the best way I can describe it is we take a look at what's going to have the most impact on value and increased efficiency before we make that investment. So for us, the biggest cost of everything that we do is labor.
Yep.
So if there's a way to reduce the amount of labor that's involved in the process, streamline the process so that it's more lean, the linear steps are there and those types of things.
No loop backs. Right?
Yeah. We've invested in equipment that's more efficient. For instance, this is a very basic example, but having an oven that heats up in 30 minutes instead of 3 hours.
Right.
Okay. So,
sure.
Things like that. But what we do is we have a list of things that are basically on our hit list of, this is something that we need to go after. And we check those off based on the investment that we have to make and the value that it gives to us. And I think that's probably why over the last several years, we've had continued growth. Our profits have grown. Our efficiencies have gone up. It's had a market effect on our ability to have success.
So we're sort of taking a really analytical approach to specific ROIs. And then how do you get that hit list? So you mentioned you guys have a hit list. Or is that something that sort of you're sitting down with your executive VP and your production manager? Are you guys getting bubble ups from the floor? Where's that list come from?
So it's all driven through communication.
Okay.
So we'll get communication either from a supervisor or a team leader or a manager that, hey, this is something that we need to look at. And it'll go on the list. We meet weekly on everything that's on that list, and it sometimes can be a toilet paper roll, but we take a close look at those things and we make decisions on what we want to do. Now, there's a great advantage for businesses to utilize a 179 deduction and invest in equipment, and we try to max that out every year. As much as possible.
That's great. So, there's two types of investments I think businesses have to make, right? There's the improvement investments, nothing's a sure thing, but to your point, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but I think it's really smart to kind of get, it's part of lean and part of to get bubbles up from the people that are actually hands-on to find out what's going to make their life better, because they know better than anybody else where the real hiccups are. But so there's that one investment, and those are easier, but then there's sort of I don't know if quantum leap's the right way to say it, but there's the investments you might buy a new machine, you buy a new process that you don't necessarily have 100% filled capacity, but it's something you think is an opportunity to grow into. It's a new IT system, an ERP or an MRP, where, it's going to take a while to see that ROI and it's hard to know it 100% up front. Do you guys make those gut investments and who makes them? How do you get there? How do you balance those against, right? Because you want to improve what you have, but if you're only focusing on incremental improvements to what you have, someone can blow by you, in the fast lane by the quantum leap. So I feel like businesses, and maybe you don't agree, but I feel like businesses have to do both. Do you agree, I guess, first with that? And how do you guys do those other investments?
Well, I agree. And the example that came to mind while you were talking about that is sometimes we'll decide to make an investment, maybe not because it initially doesn't seem like it's going to be something that's going to be a process improvement from the standpoint of more throughput or more profit or more revenue. But sometimes we'll make a decision because it's the right thing to do from the standpoint. And being in the business that we're in, environmental is a big item.
Yep.
We spend a lot of money on it every year. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we decided to invest in technology that there's only a handful of companies really, I think, around the world that even use this technology for chrome plating.
Okay.
Chrome plating is notoriously considered dirty for the environment. We've been doing it forever, forever. So we invested probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $900,000 to invest in
not a small amount of money.
Yeah, zero emission technology for our chrome plating system. Now, what we didn't know at the time was how good it was going to be for a lot of other things that we do, as far as the quality of the coating, the amount of chemicals we use, the amount of electricity that we use, the amount of water that we use, all went down. So it was a great investment, but we didn't make the decision based necessarily on those things because we weren't really sure about it. We made the investment because we wanted to try to be more of a green company and have as much impact positively on the environment as we can. And we've done that many times over the years. And I think you have to do that.
Totally. And that's all just kind of based on gut business core values, like what, you know what I mean? Cause that's a great move, and you know, good things deliver good results, but like what got you there? Just sort of inside your gut just said, this is the right thing to do. And the company's behind you on that 100%.
Well, we did the research. We were looking at trying to improve, you know, our emissions technology for that process. And we went out and we did the research, and there was a handful of different ways to go. Right. You could spend X amount of money and do it the traditional way, spend a little bit more, and you know, kind of walk up the ladder toward where we actually went, which was the highest cost way. Okay. But actually ended up being super positive and saving us a lot of money on an ongoing basis. So we get the benefit of that going forward. Plus, we know that zero emissions are going out there into the environment because of that. So you guys can feel good about that, share that with the teams and whatnot. Yep.
So I just want to circle back to the kind of the open book stuff and working with the team. Do you guys do performance bonuses on a regular basis? Is there profit sharing? Like, kind of how do you guys share, if at all, the success? And no one says you have to, right? I mean, you guys took the risk, you made it here, but do you guys share any of the success with the team? And do you think that's contributed to people staying at Har-Conn? You know, I'm just curious about people thinking about that all the time.
Well, I hope so. Because we do, that's a conversation that we have a lot. Your employees are very important, and you want to do everything you can to keep them. And even at that, sometimes it's not enough. But we, for a small company, I think that we invest quite a bit in our employees. We not only have the 401k with probably one of the better matches. And I've been told I'm not really greatly knowledgeable about that, but whenever somebody comes in here and talks to us about our matching program, they're shocked at what we do. So we have that. We do have incentive bonuses that are provided to the employees based on a very simple goal. Okay. It's simple. We designed it that way on purpose. It drives our business, 100% in the direction that we want it to, and all they're doing is focusing on an overall number, and that number was not randomly selected. It was designed to do that. So there's incentive bonuses.
Does everybody have the same number, different depending on the job, or what do you?
It's based on overall company performance.
Oh, perfect. So if the company executes on this one number, gross margin or whatever it is, we're gonna all share in success. So we work together, succeed together, sharing the success together.
Right. Plus,
that's awesome.
Yeah, and plus when times are good, we've always done discretionary bonuses across the board, and then. The last couple of years, we've been able to do some incredible things for our employees with, a week's pay here, a week's pay there, and bonuses because things are going really well and we want to reward them. But part of that open book management piece is here's where we are, here's why we're there, and here's how it impacts you. And everything that the individual does supports the team. Everything that the team does supports the business.
And the business
moves on from there.
Turns so the business comes around and supports you. Right. So if you get that virtuous cycle.
Try to connect all the dots for them.
Do you guys do like kind of the employee appreciation? I don't know if that's even the right word, but like, lunches. I don't know. Do you guys do any like kind of fun, interesting stuff? And if so, what is that? Share that with them.
So we actually have a unique connection with Ted's Steam Cheeseburgers.
Okay.
My uncle actually is a part owner in that. So we have them come up.
Entrepreneurship runs in your family, Tim.
Yeah. So he brings his he'll bring his truck up, and we'll serve the employees steamed cheeseburgers. And when we have a great quarter or something like that, we'll do that. And there's a lot of other different methods we use. Barbecues. We'll have the managers go out there and cook hot dogs and hamburgers for the employees. And whenever we can do that, we take advantage of it.
Yeah, I think the leadership investment you talked about too, something I'm really hot on right now is the steamed cheeseburgers, which next time you have that, give me a holler. I'll walk over and get one. That sounds awesome, and the barbecues and all that's great. But the thing you mentioned before about leadership and using with like Jim Grigsby and helping people train and learn to grow, I believe that that's something that's so critically important, not just for the business, but also for the people that work in the business, right? We want to show people they have an opportunity to grow too, and that they're contributing something. You do that with the leadership team. Is there other things you do around to help kind of folks grow in their own careers and give them opportunities? I mean, some people don't. Some people are content to stay where they are, but do you have opportunities to show people? And how does Har-Conn work on stuff like that?
So I mean, that's probably the biggest one.
Okay,
but I always try to keep in my mind that one of the things that we should do as leaders is provide people ladders that they may not normally have. Mm-hmm. So somebody that may be working as a production worker, but has the drive to become a manager somewhere down the road. One of the things that we've done is we've developed roadmaps for those people, where it's a collaboration between them as the individual and us as the company to get them to where they need to go.
Right.
And what that could entail is maybe part of it would be the leadership training, but there might be other educational components to that roadmap where, as they hit those certain thresholds, they would get promoted, or they would get an increase in pay, or they would get
this is something where you've sat down with them and said, hey, what are your what are your goals and objectives?
And we write them out.
And you write them out. Wow. We
write them out with hard timelines in there. And, sometimes those slip, but, they always say, put your goals in cement and the rest of it in sand.
Right. Exactly.
But so we've done that in the past, and it's worked well for us for the individual, because they have a good line of sight to where they're going. Mm-hmm. Because, a lot of times, people that have that drive, if you don't provide them that line of sight, they may go somewhere else because they can't see where they're gonna go, or they're gonna get where they want to get to.
It's another part of that communication, that's sort of part of, not necessarily directly linked to the open book philosophy there, the great game business, but in a way it is, right? I mean, if people don't see around the corner, see over the horizon, then they don't know where they're going, and then that's hard to live in a situation where you don't know where you're going.
Right. How do you talk to somebody about the future of the company if you don't have the whole with them, right? Mm-hmm. What's in it for me?
What's in it for me? Absolutely.
So that's a big reason why we do that, and it's been successful.
So we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but there's something that I want to get back to, because it's something that I think is in kind of the business zeitgeist right now, is this like upcoming downturn that we're likely to have. So I think one thing that you could share, and I don't know the answer to this, and I'm really anxious to hear it, was like, you guys have been through kind of a slowdown and a reemergence before. And, for people who maybe haven't been through that before, or know what that's all about, or forgot, what did you guys do to kind of get through it and do it successfully, and do it not just in a way to survive, but reposition yourself to re-thrive? Because, one of the things I find, so inspiring about your story, Tim, and that we've talked about, is that you guys have been through the boom bust cycle, but you came back to boom again and have just done it in a new and a fresh way, and innovated even through the times when it wasn't as easy. And so just share some of your lessons there, and what we could take away on how to survive a down cycle and come back stronger than before.
So I think our company's philosophy on that is that when those things happen, the very first people that should take a hit on that is ownership,
leadership.
Because I stated earlier that our employees are very important to us. And what we did in the last downturn was we used every tool that we could to try to keep as many employees as we could. I think even though about 30% of our business went away, almost overnight, I think we kept probably 90 to 95% of our employees during that time. And we did unique things by reducing our own salaries and cutting back, as things started to downturn, so that we could continue to, keep costs low and continue to have the business have cash and keep our employees employed. And then, we did ask people to take temporary, reductions in pay or furloughs or whatever, but we used whatever tools we could because we know the importance of our employees. We spent all the time and effort to, get them in a place where they are. And what we do is very unique. We can't go out there, or very rarely can we go out there and find somebody that has experience in what we do and bring them in and have them work for us. Number one, if they have that experience, they've probably been trained in a different way than we've trained them, and it doesn't always fit.
Translates. So
sometimes we get lucky.
Then you have to untrain to retrain, which is its own challenge. Yeah.
Sometimes we get lucky and we find a good free agent. We have a handful of those at our facility right now, and we're very lucky. But our employees are very important to us, and we want to do everything in our power to hold on to those. So we'll take whatever steps are necessary to make sure that we keep them employed, even if their hours are reduced. And I always think
because you want that talent to be there when it comes back. It sort of reminds me of that book, Leaders Eat Last, right? You know, and I think what's I think been great about what you've done that I think all of us business owners could take a lesson from too is remembering that, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think when things are good, the owners do well, and we got to make sure that we're taking care of people then, and also when things aren't as good. Number one, so that the business can keep going, because we want that talent to be there when it eventually comes back. And number two, to the point you said about the environmental, sometimes, man, it's just the right thing to do, and I think that's a really awesome lesson. You guys have obviously lived it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say on that topic, but it's really inspiring stuff.
No, I mean, I think you have to. We live in this world.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the business that we're in isn't considered the most environmentally friendly business, but there are things that we should do and can do to be as good about that as we can.
Sure. Listen, and we need what you have, right? I mean, the stuff that you guys do is critical to the things that keep us safe with our military every day, and that allow us to get places, to visit family, go on vacation, and do things that are new. So to have somebody who's doing that critical task to give us those critical items that we want for our livelihood, to know that someone out there is doing it in a way that's environmentally safe and friendly, I think is awesome. And I hope that your customers and the end OEM customers appreciate that and realize that that's something really special. So if you're not advertising that, Tim, get it out there, because I think it's really, really good. Listen, before we kind of go to wrap up here, I just wanted to ask you, do you have a white whale? We call it the white whale customer. Like, is there a customer out there that you're like, man, I would love, been trying to get in there, I want them to give me a shot. We always ask that question, maybe get this podcast in front of them and have them give you a call.
White whale customer. I can't think of any.
Can't think of any right now. All right. Well, if you think of it later, you let me know. We'll put it in the thing. All right, cool. Well, let's go to our rapid fire round of questions. So super hot take, whatever you got comes off. So first thing, Red Sox or Yankees?
Neither.
Oh, Starbucks or Dunkin'?
Starbucks.
Staycation or exotic destination?
Exotic destination.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Sports car.
Oh, well, you got the Red Sox wrong, but you got the sports car right. If you could do anything other than what you're doing now, what would it be?
Ski bum.
Oh, okay. Very nice. What is your favorite business book? Favorite, most impactful?
Integrity.
Oh, no, I don't know that one. And what's one thing that you learned earlier in your career or your life that helped propel you to the success you've had?
People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Oh, that's solid. And what's something you learned later in your life that you wish you go back and tell young Tim that you think would have helped?
Patience.
Man,
didn't have a lot of patience when I was younger.
No, but then you learned it later and wish you had found it sooner.
I can think of many situations that I could go back to and handle much better than I did when I was younger. Yes.
Can't we all? If people want to know more about Har-Conn or want to connect with you, Tim, what's the best way to find out about that?
Best way is through our website. That's www.har-conn.com.
HAR-CONN.com.
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that'll be in the show notes, and then get to you, get to you through that. That's awesome. So listen, at the very end, I just want to know, we talked about a lot of stuff, and given everything that we talked about, what's like one thing that stands out to you that someone who's listening could take away and get some real value out of it in their own life or their own business? What's kind of the one thing you feel like right there?
So the one thing that I'm most proud of is when we talked about the leadership investment that we're making in our people. That has had such a huge effect on our business overall. And what I've seen is there are several other companies that are in the same type of program. I'm not saying they have to go to the same exact program that we're in, but invest in developing leaders within your organization, because what it does is it takes pressure off upper management. It makes you drive your culture, and you get happy, invested employees that are working toward the mission and the vision of your organization. So I've been very proud of the fact that we've put so many people through that program. I'm looking forward to putting more through.
And that's really a force multiplier, because not only are you helping them out, but then they're leading other people. Like, yeah, I think that's a super awesome takeaway. And I'm going to do two. I sometimes do two. It's my show. I'll steal you. So I think the first one is, I love the great game of business concept and the sort of open book management and the communication that comes from that. I think too many businesses are afraid of that. And I think, fear is never a good way to make decisions or run anything. I think you got to lean in. And I think that's the more people that talk about, like you did, the success they've had in that communication across all levels of the organization, so that everyone knows what we're doing, the results and the outcomes. I think that's such a powerful lesson that people could take away. That'd be really great. And the last one, even though it's right towards the end, and it's close, near and dear to my heart, because I have the exact same problem, is patience. We always want everything now. That feels like that desire in today's movie download, Amazon Prime, next day delivery culture, probably even more so than ever. But I think and the more that the culture has so little patience, the more that having patience becomes a unique standout effect that I think drives a ton of value. And I'm super happy that you brought that up. So Tim, thanks so much for being on, man. It was super fun.
I appreciate being here. Thank you for having me.
Nice. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.